more on my agenda, but to lighten up the mood, let's try some quiz first. Some of you may be excited, and I'm not sure if we know all the answers yet because we haven't really seen much about Linux yet, but there probably will be some interesting fun facts that we can learn about it. So it would be great if you could join that game here. Currently 12 players. I'm still missing around 60. Right. Ish. Are you joining as well?
Yeah.
Cool. Including lecturer. Yeah, that sounds good. There you go. Getting set. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a trap. Cool, 31. We're getting there, so nearly 50%. Parameter sanitization. Checking for sanitization. There you go. Right. With RF, you still do, yeah. Yes, only with F. But if you just -R, you won't.
Yeah,
we'll ask you.
There's 0 warnings.
That the F means false.
Yeah, I mean, but still.
There's no.
It will.
I think you need to have, you would need to have a special distribution of checks for that. Anything I know, a false is false. That's, I mean, Unix is not about being verbose. Unix is about doing what's supposed to do and being quiet unless there's an error.
Yeah, but with this like user experience.
I know.
And if someone asks them that from
The reason is that RM is actually part of what is called the POSIX specification. And we get to that next session, and then you will see why it won't change those things. You know, so the semantics are kind of specified, given already. So we talk about this. That's a good point. Bring it back up again when we talk about POSIX. Yeah, next session, please. Cool. 48 players. Everyone here? Everyone who wants to join has joined? Anyone still struggling to join and doesn't want to be left out? 50 players, yeah. Cool. No duplicate logins? No? Okay, 50. Shall we go then?
Yeah.
Okay, let's do it. So first I need to start the sound so we have some suspense. I don't know, there's no suspense, is there? Anyway, okay, 50 players, off we go. Who's considered the father of Linux? This one is easy. All right, Ken Thompson. Okay, cool, interesting. What is Ken Thompson? Who's Ken Thompson?
Who is the Ken Thompson father of? C. No, C.
C. There you go. Yeah.
Very
cool.
good.
Well done.
So he's technically the father of Linux.
Linux, yeah, well, yeah, you don't want to spin it too far, right? Grandfather, yes, he's yeah. Cool. All right, cool. Not much of a clear lead yet, but we're getting there. So now, what does POSIX stand for? We didn't talk about it, but perhaps you can guess it. Just guess quiet. Good, well done. So that's correct. Portable operating system interface. We'll talk about this more in the next session to give you an intuition. It's basically the unification of the user interface across all Unixes and Linuxes, but I'll be more explicit about it tomorrow. Cool. Everyone ready? The leads. Oh yeah, there's a moderate lead. What's the market share of Linux among supercomputers?
It's randomized. Every question is this time. So
I learned.
I did.
No.
It is indeed 99.6. So there's That is quite intense, isn't it? 99.6. So supercomputers, Linux is very hot there. We have a moderate lead. Okay, next question. So which operating system occupies the remaining market share among supercomputers? So Unix indeed. So we find 100% of the top 500 supercomputers are actually Unix and Linux based. So in that realm, there's no alternative. If you want to do serious high performance computing and so on, you need to know Linux. There's nothing else you can run it on nowadays. It was quite different 10 years ago. It was mostly Linux, a bit of Windows, and Unix heavy. But nowadays, it's totally Linux world. Cool. All right. So kind of still flexible leads here. We'll see how that goes. Okay, we continue. Oh, yeah, that should be straightforward. Let's see how many of you listened today.
There's too many players in the same area. The network is so slow.
Yep, cool. Sweet. So PWD. PWD, yep. Cool. We have somewhat a lead there, barely. What's the purpose of the path variable? Okay, just leading there. So, okay. So it's something we need to talk about. We didn't explicitly talk about yet. Cool. So it's for basically for ensuring that programs or binaries at arbitrary locations are globally accessible, meaning you don't need to qualify them by specifying the location. You just type the command, like we did for Go in particular. You just can run Go from anywhere. So it's means it's on the path variable. Cool. Oh yeah, that's a shift here in leads. Okay, considerable, in fact. What was the originally intended name for Linux?
There goes wrong.
A more unlikely one. Yes. So it was basically a mix of free Unix and free in particular. So that was a Linux-inspired name. The story of how it became Linux was basically the operator of the FTP server Linux was working on. He named the. I need to split you guys eventually. So he actually renamed the branch or the folder on the FTP server as Linux, and since then it has stuck, and Linux has accepted that and became Linux. Otherwise, we would have been dealing with freaks. Yes. Okay, cool. So now we know. In which year was Linux made available? Should know that now. It's my second slide. Yep, that looks very good. So people actually attending. 1987, that's cool. Okay. Okay. Okay, 8th angle. Who is the top contributor to the Linux kernel? We'll see that in a second. It is a company, but which one?
I got stuck.
No excuses. Only because your Wi-Fi doesn't work.
Yeah.
So who's the computer?
Google.
Okay. It is Intel then, please. The most unlikely one. So Intel has contributed by far. Hey guys. So Linux is actually a playing field for companies. It's not so much the idealistic individual contributor that contributes code and so on. It's really business. It's really companies doing it. And Red Hat is super important because, you know, they're a propagator of Linux. But in fact, Intel has done the most contribution, which is a very unlikely company, right? One would expect either Google or Red Hat. By the way, Samsung is coming up. They are, I think, occupying 4% now of code-based contributions. And I think Intel sits at 12 right now. So, but Samsung is putting heavy investment into contribution to the Linux kernel because they're using Android, right? So they have vested interest into, you know, carving the future pathway of Linux. So, I don't know it by heart. I would need to look it up. But yeah, but considerably less.
Yeah, a few years back they were heavily criticized for not contributing at all.
Yeah,
they, you know, because they use Android, and since then they've been putting stuff in.
Yes.
Yeah.
But still not to the extent. Intel is really interesting. Cool. So what's the lead like? The lead, oh, by 500 points. That's, yeah, okay. Getting somewhere. How many lines of code does the Linux kernel have right now, approximately? Tough one.
Tough one.
That's just guessing.
Guessing.
What's your guess?
Green.
Ah, yeah? The obvious one. So at the current stage, the Linux kernel has roughly about 19 million lines of code. So it's considerable, considerable aspects there. Cool. Considerable amount of code. We're having the lead is clearing, yeah, somewhat. Cool. Look at the kernel. Which bad word is most commonly found in the kernel code? Any idea?
Guessing.
Obviously. It's by far crap. So it stands out considerably. I think. So, and I think it's followed by shit as the next common word in the kernel code. So the Linux community is known for being very kind of verbose about the quality of fellow contributors. So you find there's quite a prevalence of those terms. So it's an index about bad words for that purpose. Cool. Estimated share of Linux on desktop machines. This time desktop machines. So it's pitiful 1.7%. This is obviously determined based on internet access because there's no, you know, there's no central authority for operating system registration or whatever else. But based on internet access, 1.7% of desktop computers run Linux. So it's next to nothing, especially compared to the supercomputers we talked about, right? So we really see there are different niches for application. 1.7%. Lead. Oh, yeah, that's very tight here. Oh, okay. That is very tight. Okay, mobile devices. Again, market share. So brackets are a bit broader here. So, yeah, okay, right. So actually, not too far off. The green one is not too far off. In fact, I think it's roughly about 81% right now, based on latest sales and shipments. But why is Linux so important on mobile devices? Android, right? So the underlying kernel for Android, the Android operating system again is Linux. That's the key reason. Cool. Yep.
Is iOS considered Unix derivative?
No, not iOS. Mac OS X is though. What iOS?
Yeah, so iOS isn't, but Mac OS is.
Okay, so we will briefly allude to it next time. Yep.
iOS counted as 50% of the market share on mobile devices.
50%.
Everyone else is Android. So 50-50 on almost.
No, certainly not.
iOS system is dominates about 15%
Yeah.
of the market.
Yeah, it's gone down tremendously in the past few years. So yeah, it's really a minor player right now. It's just they have fairly high visibility, but the actual penetration of the market is not that high anymore. Again, this boils down to shipped units, right? So it's always a skewed market, and there's a lot of fragmentation in the Android market, right? All those cheap phone developers, like those upcoming manufacturers, that are obviously scoring some points in this area. So. Right. Okay. Clear leads when. Right. Why are Linux commands so short? You notice that some commands are very short. Why is that the case? Cool. So faster to type is attractive, arguably, especially if you learn them by heart. But this was not the key reason. The central reason was really to minimize the memory footprint used by keeping commands in working in operating system memory. Because again, we need to think about Unix times. Memory was a serious concern. Nowadays, not a big deal, especially not for system utilities. But at that time, you would need to be very careful with occupying yet another character, right? So you find that most main Unix commands, or the most important ones, are generally 2 digits, and then the less important ones are longer than that one. So generally, perhaps up to 5 digits is something you find quite often as well. But we talk about this a bit more tomorrow. But in fact, it boils down to the Unix legacy. Yeah, cool. All right, new player, new folder 3. Why do we always have new folders here? And who is new folder 2 and 1? Ah, that's you. Okay.
We are 3.
Are you right? You're doing a team-based approach. Well, didn't say anything against this. So anything left? Oh, a few more questions. Well, we get a bit faster now. What was the first architecture Linux was developed for? You should know that. I expect 100% here. Oops. All right. Okay. Well, it was an Intel CPU. Most of you agreed on that one, but it was the 386 that was the dominating or the bleeding edge technology in a consumer area at that time. So Linux was developed for this Intel 8386. Cool. So nearly done. We should know that as well. What's the programming language that most of the kernel is written in? I should reduce the timeout, eh? Cool. Well done. C, obviously, right? So with Unix, the history of Unix is kind of interlinked with the history of C. It was the mainstream programming language there. In consequence, for Linux, the same. C is the programming language to go if you are developing natively on Linux. Okay, decent lead here from new folder 3. Okay. We didn't talk about this. That's, yeah, good luck to you. The ones that had Linux before will know a bit more. Where's user information stored in Linux? Which file? Okay. We still need to learn about this, I noticed. Okay. But that's the obvious guess, yes. Okay, cool. We come to that in the, probably, I'm not sure if we can still do it today, but at least latest tomorrow. So it's in that Etsy past WD. I get into that, why it is the case tomorrow. Cool, what was the name of the original GNU kernel? We talked about this earlier, should be quick. Cool. Right. So herd is correct. I would have accepted herd of Unix replacing daemons as well. because herd is actually an acronym, a recursive acronym for that one. Herd means herd of Unix replacing daemons. What is a daemon? Yeah, it can be that, but this is an example of a daemon. But what's a daemon in itself? What's the concept of a daemon? Anyone? That's correct. A background service in Unix systems. That's very correct. In Windows, we would call those services or background services. In Linux, it's always daemon on Unix as well. Yeah, cool. All right. Oh, we're done. Okay. Wow. That's yep. A pretty tight lead, though. I mean, you know, but very well done. So, who's kill -1-9? Yep. Well done. Okay. Why did you pick your username? Oh, how? What's the intuition? Okay. Right. Okay. Well, it's one approach. Cool. Second highest is Trejoningen. Is that correct? Trejoningen. How do you pronounce it properly? Trejoningen. That's you? Oh, okay. Okay. And yeah, congratulations to you guys. And new folder, those guys. So how many of you? 2 of you? Okay. Well done, guys. Well done. Thanks for guessing around. So that's cool. I suspect we're kind of running out of time, frankly, because I want to be a bit deeper into users. And how far are you done installing USB sticks and following the tutorial I posted on Blackboard? Who did all that?
We tried, but we ended up using virtual box.
That's fine. Yes. I just before the break, I got the question, or during the break, in fact, I got the question. First of all, why did we do what we did last week? That wasn't quite clear. So some of you installed Go and Heroku and Google Cloud Computing interfaces on your Windows machine. And now we seem to do it again. And our intuition was we have a very diverse class. So many people running Windows, quite a lot of you running Linux. Many want to learn Linux. And we felt it's a good opportunity for you to expose you to Linux because you will need to use it in AWS anyway. You saw the supercomputer stats that clearly point towards the use of Linux in the future. So we felt it's a good opportunity. Secondly, we want to have a uniform operating system that we use, so it's easier for us to support. That's the reason. So you will need to reinstall to some extent this software on a Linux basis, whatever that may be. Ubuntu Bash is a limited solution. You can do some basic Linux commands, but you can't run services there, which we need for Heroku in particular. So again, that's why we need to either use USB sticks, as described in Blackboard, or alternatively using a VM. I also heard that in some cases, the USB sticks won't start with your laptop, so it's specific to your machine. Even though it's the preferable solution, because it natively runs on your hardware, it may not always work. In that case, please fall back to using a virtual machine environment, and that would be then something like Oracle VirtualBox, for example. VirtualBox open source. There are various other solutions like Microsoft Virtual PC and VMware Workstation, I believe. But all of those are proprietary. You either need licenses or they're tied to your operating system. I recommend, obviously, open source, but that would be the alternative to do it. Please. Right, you're talking about dual booting?
Yeah.
Right. So we had the intuition that you install it only on your USB stick, including a persistent partition. The instructions say how to do that, meaning you store everything on your stick, and ideally it would be portable, meaning you can plug it into any machine you find, and hopefully boots, which is a tricky one because you need to switch to USB booting on your particular laptop. That's too particular to give instructions. You need to look up how to do that, but you should be able to. Alternatively, dual boot is an option if you natively want to install it on your machine, but then you could, for example, also use an external hard drive and so on. But VM is probably very low intrusion, meaning the likeliness of you corrupting your system is very low, because again, this repartitioning business can go sideways. So I strongly encourage you to make backups of your system if you're doing dual booting, because that is usually kind of tricky issue. This one is non-intrusion. That's not dangerous at all. Please ensure that you have a working Linux. We continue tomorrow. Is anyone left out of tasks to do? Because then I give you tasks. But we have at least 2 tasks to do, the USB stick and the tutorial I highlighted there. Else we continue tomorrow, and I attach some additional tutorial tasks then. Questions, worries, comments?
Many words.
Many worries.
I already wrote.
Oh, really?
So basically, we have the